This particular writing, the analytical writing, is usually considered, I don't want to say it's the hardest, but it's the one that you haven't done before. Okay? At the end of the semester, I always ask everybody, what was the easiest, what was the hardest, and what did you like the best, and what did you learn from? And they always, well, not always, most of them said this one was the most difficult. But not that it was hard, it was just that it was new. And so what we're going to do is kind of try to reprogram the way you look at writing for the next couple weeks. Because normally you're given some reading to analyze. And in that reading, we pretty much ask you to, summarize. Do you understand what's going on? Do you, can you get from A to B without, having a teacher needing to hold your hand? It's normally just, can you understand? What we focus on now is not so much the message, the purpose of it, but how did the writer get you to understand? How did the writer get you to, from A to B, get you to, be entertained, for humor, whatever. And after today's discussion, I think it'll make a little bit more sense. You'll have a lot of opportunities to practice this type of writing before we get to the actual, here's your essay choice, here's 5, and you pick one of these essays and you write about it. So you'll have a couple of these opportunities prior to the actual graded one. So it shouldn't be very stressful at all. Okay. However, it's just a different, like I said, you have to flip a switch a little bit, and I think today's activity will enlighten you a little bit more. But you can see that with analytical writing, it's not so much discussing what the point of something is, the summation of it, but it's how they wrote it, what steps they took to get it, what rhetorical devices, what literary terms we talk about were used. Did they tell a story? Did they provide an anecdote? You breaking it down and looking at the framework of what they wrote, the choices that they made. So it's the discussing how an author draws a reader in and then gets their message. That's what we focus on. It's not, well, they're talking about this and this. Well, it's not so much what they're talking about. It's more how they are writing. Okay, and that's the thing I'll keep saying almost every day. And for some reason, people don't believe me that that's what we're supposed to do. And then when we get to the final essay, they're just writing a summary of the essay that they chose instead of analytically dissecting it like we've been doing. So for some reason, people don't listen. So just some basic rhetorical devices that you will probably recognize, and there are more, but these are just some of the basic ones. Putting in allusions. That's when the writer alludes to something that they expect you to know and understand. Reading Shakespeare, he does this a lot with mythology. In history, we had allusions, in the lit class, in Beowulf, they were alluding to Grendel being the offspring of Cain, and all of these things, Cain and Abel's story, and so you were expected to know the stuff about the Bible. So those are the allusions. Putting in analogies, anecdotes, their little stories, things to prove a point. Putting in some sarcasm, some illustrations, your figure of speeches at the bottom. Similes, metaphors, personification, choices that the writer made. Okay, they put this in. Why did they put this in? And that's what we're focusing on. Okay, and there's a couple links I'll show you in a little bit to help you with that. But ultimately, this is a slide that you'll want to come back to, and it's sprinkled into a couple of the PowerPoints on Moodle. What do you need to think about? You need to break it down into several different steps. The first is, what's the purpose of this writing? And we will have activities throughout this unit. We'll analyze commercials. What's the purpose? Okay, you've had this before with your writing. What's the purpose of the writing? To entertain? Are they informing you, or is it just simply to entertain? Today's example will be an entertaining one. Okay, rhetorical devices, that's what we just looked at a little bit ago. Rhetorical appeals, we'll spend time talking about your ethos, pathos, and logos. Does that sound vaguely familiar? Okay, it talks about emotions and logic and things like that. So just basic, what's the purpose? What does it appeal to? And then other ways that you can appeal to, putting in some jokes, putting in some stats, a startling fact. And we'll show you examples of all of these. But these are kind of the basic guides or framework that you need to come back to when we go into this particular type of writing and analysis. In looking at the Moodle page, you can see that we have several things sprinkled throughout. little practicing things we're going to do over the next 2 weeks before we actually assign what we're going to, the one you're going to be working on. There's some documents in here, some PowerPoints, that we'll go over as time, goes by. But take some time if you have a free moment here there, just skim through them. Especially, in dealing with the ethos, pathos, and logos, for example. If those, they're pretty simple, but if it's been a year or more, you're just like, what? Oh, I remember it was something. Just go back and reskim, and it'll take just a moment to refresh your mind, and I think it'll make sense. There's a PowerPoint on listing rhetorical devices that might be helpful. Here's a link, Web Rhetorical Devices Review, where there's a couple websites that just have a whole ton of them. Okay? We're not going to take lit term quizzes. We're not going to have to say how many can you memorize or what's the definition of this. But simply being able to identify them will go a long way in helping you. Okay? So maybe come up and find that lit term list that you have from your lit class, those that are taking it now. That might be very, very helpful for you. So a lot of resources here to help you along the way for your analytical. And we'll talk, like I said, we'll talk more about the actual paper, your requirement for the grade, in a week and a half, 2 weeks. But now we're just focusing on, kind of looking at it with a different perspective, viewpoint. Stephen King, While We Crave for Movies. We're going to read a couple-page article on Stephen King, who's a very famous, I would think we can all agree, horror writer. And this particular piece is, why people crave horror, to be scared. Why do people be scared by movies? I already kind of told you that, it is about, to entertain. Go ahead and read it. Okay, you're going to spend some time, and I want you to go through it, read it once, read it twice, and you're instinctively going to be like, okay, I know what this is about. This is why he's blah, 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 blah. You're summarizing. What you need to do is separate yourself from it and go, how is he proving a point? He made a really good argument. How did he make that argument? What anecdotes or jokes or facts or, how did he pass the emotion in his writing and the voice onto you? Okay? There's an additional worksheet directly below it. You can click and open up that, and that's what we're going to work on today. This will take most of the period, if not all, and this is to be due for tomorrow. I don't know, there's 15 questions or so. Some of the earlier questions in there, in that worksheet, deal with more of the understanding the summary and such. But the last half of them are really kind of more of the questions leading towards where I want you to go. Analyzing the tone. Who do you think the audience is for this writing? It's getting you to think on a different level besides just the summation level that we typically, and everybody does, I do, okay? Not many people ever write like this. But if you can break it down and tear apart writing and learn from the insides of the writing, well, in theory, you should be able to construct that back and apply it to your writing, and you know it a lot better. Okay, so whatever we do to these authors' writings, you should be able to learn and then break down your writing accordingly as we go. So answer these questions, excuse me, as fully and completely as you can. Complete sentences to the best of your ability, not just short answer. That is, it's not just a, oh, that'll take longer. It's not just for that, okay? It's not really for that at all. But it's to help you find the information in your mind already, start to putting it in sentences, so that when we start putting it in essay format, you're already used to it, okay? It's already a piece of cake, and you're ready to, succeed and such. So as you'll see towards the bottom, talking about the purpose, talking about the tone, these particulars. And they look for examples, learn from taking it apart. And we'll do this a few times in the next couple weeks. Eventually, we're not going to even have questions like this. It's stuff that your mind should already be starting to be programmed like that.